have Fernando Mesa is coming up now, and he's been a big fan of data centricity, Dave McComb, and he originally brought some of this thinking to Platts, a division of S&P Global, and he's now the CTO at New York Bank of Mellon. And his team of product engineers are infusing a semantic angle in the development of what he calls a data vault. So very interesting to hear more about the business challenge that you're solving and why this direction. So whenever you're ready, Fernando.
Wonderful. So again, thanks for the invite. I think I will be the outlier in this session, as I'm not here to present the merits of the uh, wonderful technology that we've come to know and love over the last few decades, that of graph technology, RDF, taxonomies, property graphs, and all of that great stuff. In fact, the topic of discussion for today, as we share some of our experiences, relates to that elusive semantic layer that everybody has tried to some degree of success in implementing. I saw some of the prior presentations. Great to see that there are companies that have been able to crack that problem. We are still trying to make sense of how to use those semantic layers in some of the data platforms that we are building. So we'll share a use case in which we have simplified the story and see if that can you know, bring some ideas to the audience that we can share over the chat room. I'll start quickly with myself. I have been in the industry for several decades, mainly working in financial services and healthcare. I've worked in companies such as MarkLogic, which I think have one of the best triple stores in the business. I have also worked for a financial services company like S&P Global, and Steve just mentioned um, part of my job there was sort of bringing the world of semantics and graph technology to the larger enterprise. So we work with semantic arts there. What I am doing currently as CIO for the data and platform solutions business at BNY Mellon is to develop a data platform that is now commercially available uh, to provide our clients the means of connecting the bank's information that we produce for them, market data that it is part of their business operations, and their own data as a unified approach. So here's what you should expect from this conversation. Someone who's built these things from the ground. So there's a pragmatic angle to this. Um, Not a lot of theory, but lots of pain and suffering in being able to scale and harden our data fabric, which is where our semantic layer sits. And what an elusive exercise that is, and I'll share why. Um, Let me go with this and then share what the industry has been saying about that. And specifically, one company that I always keep an eye on, which is Gartner. So, JT, could you move to the next slide, please? So, here's the interesting, exciting part. Um, Clearly, there's a lot of excitement about how a data fabric can add value to a existing data platforms, whether they are for internal use by departments within a corporation, or whether it is a commercial product like ours that is sold in the marketplace. Data Fabric since 2019 and even before has made it in the Gartner's top trends in data and analytics. As the role of data fabric and its use expands, uh, now the data fabric, according to Gardner, has become a foundation that is necessary to be able to do more with one's data assets, especially as you now begin to bring metadata that is sometimes collected but not used in the day-to-day operations, in the real-time delivery of information. Now metadata becomes a centric part of a data fabric implementation and architecture. So when they say metadata is the new black, I could not agree more. In fact, in our own use case and example, it is not so much the raw data we provide, although valuable, it is the decorations that we put atop of that that are yielding more and more value and a differentiating factor to the platform that we have. So clearly, if I'm sure everyone here on this session has implemented or is implementing some sort of data fabric or data mesh. Um, Here's where things get a little bit confusing. If we could go to the next slide, JT, please. If you look at Gartner's, Forrester, and other industry analysts, your head will spin trying to reconcile the notion of a data fabric versus a data mesh. What are they? How different are they? Does it really matter? Their differences. So there's reams and reams of papers, as well as technology that sort of meets the realm of a data fabric, of a data mesh, especially if you look at this either as a virtualization solution or a data abstraction layer that sits atop the data sources, or if you think about it more broadly in terms of deriving a data network. Um, Many companies are now creating or are joining these large data network enterprises. And Data Fabric, they see as a conduit for delivering those benefits. Again, whether it is a data fabric or data mesh, what we decided to do here in our business is to forego the purity and just get stuff done and began to build a piece of technology that we have patented that sort of tries to bring the meaningful and actually beneficial elements that a data fabric and a data mesh would bring. So I don't know if the Gardener's view in any way is the view of members of the audience, but we felt that we really needed to simplify the story because it was getting too complicated. Mm. Let's go to the next slide, please, JT. Great. So Steve mentioned the use case that we have. We've created a product called the Data Vault, which is a data platform that provides ways for clients to ingest, source, curate, and ultimately get the outcome of those benefits in the data they have through this platform of ours. Data Fabric is the way that Data Vault clients get the data. So you can think of it as a data access layer that provides all of the protections necessary. As we sit in the cloud, we need to be extremely careful as how the data is accessed by our multiple tenants. This being a multi-tenant architecture where each one of our clients has a slice of the platform in the form of a tenancy model. So Fabric is the thing that they see, taste, and leverage. And you can imagine all of the not only functional but operational stresses that that puts on that Fabric layer. Um, Let me jump into the data fabric itself and describe what it does, and then how this becomes, again, an elusive problem. Um, could we go to the next slide, please, JT? Great. So, since a data fabric can be many things to many people. We decided to narrow the scope of what this product, which would bring clear, tangible benefits to us and our customers, and would take us away from the, I guess, the religious aspects of forcing our clients to adapt to a specific model, taxonomy, or way of accessing that information. Um, we created the data fabric behind the following concerns. One is creating this rapid data integration, making it a tool that saves the client and ourselves, including our operations teams, from having to ETL as the first step required. So um, we ELT the majority of cases when ETL is required is seen as a addition, not necessarily as a requirement. So our data fabric first serves that benefit of being able to provide that rapid data ingest, integration, and virtualization. So in that regard, you might think of your own data fabrics, well, certainly ours, as competing with products such as Denodo and other data virtualization technologies that are in the marketplace. The center is where we find the value, and this is where the data abstraction and semantic layer that we sit atop the raw data sources comes into play. Our data fabric is tied to our own proprietary data catalog, which informs data fabric on key attributes of the data stores and how to change those to meet the client's expectations of that information. This metadata not only informs the attributes and shape of our data, but it also has internal information that drives the execution and the behavior that we provide on those data sets. That is why, for us, technology like Calibra and others, although very useful in the marketplace and quite expensive in how many clients use it, we needed our own specific catalog that could drive the business metadata that is exposed through Fabric, but also the operational instructions that are hidden behind the scenes to make this data abstraction work. In addition to that, we didn't want this data fabric to be one in which there was a high degree of friction between the users and the data. So we have exposed the data through a SQL like language that allows people to create APIs basically at will that are protected and run with a simple SQL like syntax. So rather than forcing specific interfaces via APIs and having to carry the different versioning and the progression and schema drift of those data sets, we just let the client decide what part of the data do they need, get that piece of data in the shape that they want, and then they get it. It's kind of a simpler version of GraphQL without some of the baggage that technology brings. Um, so in that, the data fabric part then allows us to expose the information through our metadata, our meta language. Not only that, but we can also have people inspect our catalogs through the same language so they can ask questions of our catalog and schemas and all our decorations the same way that they would ask information about the data. So quite useful in that regards. And last, because the data that our data abstraction layer, our semantic data, requires a level of analytics, we had to create the means of analyzing the semantically driven, dynamically generated information. If this is a fabric that sits in real time in an ephemeral form, to be able to draw analytics on those derived values, transform values, new values that are generated in a client's request, doing that in real time is part of where these fast analytics were required. Um, this is all hardened behind specific use cases in the financial services space around stresses, around ESG data, trade information, accounting information, performance and attribution information, and the like. So the this may not be a horizontal solution, but it is one that is hardened with the difficulties and data problems that we have for our specific domain. So this is where we sort of narrow the scope of what a data fabric would do and how we would support a more basic semantic layer for our business. Um, and that is now what constitutes the platform fully. Let me share with you, for those techies in the call, what that platform looks like from a technology perspective. JT, could you put us on the next slide, please? Right. So here's the data platform and the data fabric, and how that, through this layer that we've created tied to our catalog, allows us to expose data to clients, whether it is via APIs, whether it is via their JDBC drivers that sit atop our data fabric, right? Whether it is data that they need specifically in the form of a Snowflake share. Those use cases are becoming more and more prevalent in our network of data play. Um, so sitting atop the Azure cloud platform, we have a set of third-party technology like Snowflake, Microsoft technology, Databricks, and we've created, again, our own secret sauce in terms of that data fabric. We had to do that because it needed to be compact, it needed to be fast, it needed to understand what we wanted to do in terms of driving this semantic view tied to our data catalog, right? And it needed to have the flexibility for us to be able to add our own set of analytics in our space. With that in place now, we have not only a more secure and protected data access layer, but also one that gives us the benefits that we just described. So a key piece here is the multiple data ingestion points that come in, whether it is APIs, data files through FTP, Kafka streams, Snowflake shares, all of that ties into our virtual models that we create on the fly and then expose through our data fabric layer. So I hope some of this uh, technical view that you see here gives you an idea of the multiple building blocks that are needed to ultimately provide the commercial data platform that we do today. Um, Let me complete my thoughts, and then I'll go into Q&A session. If we move to the next slide. I wanted to tie it to a couple of ideas in terms of, as we share, um, you know, what has worked and what has not worked for us in terms of making something that is small, targeted, business impactful, and simple for our own technology and data teams, but also for our clients. Um, One is, again, don't overthink it. You could spend several years trying to figure out the perfect architectural model, uh, the purity of what a data mesh constitutes versus a data fabric, um, whether to extend the notions of a service mesh that you have in your organization to support data related use cases, not just services, in all of the multiple aspects that a data mesh and data fabric would bring. I'd say get to work and implement a solution that meets your specific needs. Um, you may find that the better solution is one that your team puts together, as opposed to finding the best technology out there, which I think I have yet to find one that can solve every client's own specific needs. Um, Again, decide what the scope of your data fabric will be in terms of its capabilities. Don't boil the ocean. If the data access layer is the one that is the simplest, start with that. Um, Creating a data abstraction is always right. The blend in a balance of how can we add this generated value without stressing the system where these large queries come in and the semantic layer is unable to do the translation in real time at sufficient speed to meet the client's needs of that data. So try to decide how far does the abstraction and semantic layer would go. Um, how much of data analytics do you want to incorporate in it, or do you want it to always just be a pass through? Again, ideas that I think in our examples and how we have implemented a data fabric, uh, those functions always come um, as requirements that you may not have thought prior. And two, um, we always strive for making the platform be something that people will want to use, not as a standard or a mandate where you have to use this layer of abstraction and indirection or else. We're always thinking, how is it that this can be of true value add? Would our clients pay for a data fabric themselves separately? Is it a great benefit to them? Or is it again a, a hindrance for them to get to the data? And they see a data fabric more as an obstacle than an actual value add. So um, something do you want to keep in mind as you reflect on your own data fabrics and how those benefit your specific data platform? Um, so I will take a number of questions. At least on the East Coast, I know some of you will want to have some lunch, but I'm happy to take questions, thoughts. Uh, this is a subjective area in the data and technology space. So I expect people to have varying degrees of opinions as to how to best draw value out of what we call data fabrics and data meshes today.
Yeah, the first question in the chat was if your data vault is the same or is different than the open methodology for data vault of Dan Lindstedt. And then there's a link there. So I'm not sure if there's an overlap there or a difference in terminology.
Um, it is different. The Data Vault is the brand name of the BNY Mellon's data and platform solutions product. There's a number of products in our portfolio. One is the Data Vault, the other one, Data Studio, and another product called Eagle Data Management. So, no, this one is just simply a brand name given to a platform that needed a name to go along with that.
Very good. Another one. What is the language used for the discovery stage? Is there a free text search available to navigate the catalog?
Um, One is at this point, no. The catalog is queried using SQL constructs. So you would access the catalog and understand all of the vast amount of information, treating the catalog as a form of tables. There is no RDF or property graph querying. Um, the semantic search that we are bringing in partnership with Microsoft in will center on using ChatGPT as a semantic tool to help us drive meaning that has been stored in our catalog and exposing that to our data fabric. But those are initial stages at this point.
Hmm. And then one more in the chat, and then a hand up. What tools or technologies do you use for data virtualization in semantic layers?
The data visualization that we have, we created our own tool set. It is that uh, piece of Java code we call the data fabric. We had explored a number of technologies. Again, example would be Denodo and others. But what we found is that to get what we needed out of a data fabric, we would have to, pardon the pun, mesh at least five different technologies, and the data transfer and movement and the complications that that would bring to just be able to execute queries in milliseconds would become an impossibility. So we decided to take those concerns, bake them into a very powerful, compact um, container, which is ultimately where it runs, and drive the virtualization from there. That means that we use in-memory structures, durable caches, and other types of means to be able to get the performance needed in that virtualization layer.
Very good. All right, we'll take a hand up here. Okay, should be able to hear you.
Hey, thank you, Fernando. Now I have two questions based on your last answer. One is easy, I'm sure. It's short, and that is, do you work all this in your own, say, private cloud or on-prem solutions, or can you use public cloud?
We did,
And
yeah. Go ahead.
sorry,
The
go
answer
ahead.
to that is 100% built and designed for the private cloud with the level of multi-tenancy and elasticity that the cloud would give us to be able to provide with the same amount of resources, more tenancy, and economies of scale. So that's the answer to one.
Thank you. And the second one is there is something. I think your presentation conveyed really nicely the traffic that this can support, like the different requests and queries and so obviously feeds and things like that. And I wonder, and of course you mentioned also data share as one of the fabric layers. What sort of security do you have around that? Like, obviously, I'm not asking about tools or things, but how do you structure? Like, is it sort of a real-time sort of authorization system that I, as a Bank of New York analyst, immediately have access to the data I can access, but not to but other data is secured, or is something more constricted than that?
Yes, it is. It is role based. We have multiple layers of protection at the network level, at the Kubernetes level, at the data fabric level through a set of entitlements and authentication mechanisms, because this is our front end, so to speak, to the world in terms of data dissemination. Uh, the we have a quite a high bar, and there's very strict levels of data protection that are needed. Because we share data, though, we have to strive a balance between not locking the benefit of the data behind uh, too many unnecessary layers of difficulty. So data protection, yes. Making it difficult to access the data, no, once you've established those credentials and they have been vetted by the system. It gets a little bit, it's both good and bad to be in the cloud, in that we have a number of tools and mechanisms that help us do that better, but there's also the concerns of having data in the cloud, and how do we ensure that not only the data that passes through data fabric, but also the data that is stored in our Snowflake databases, as well as others, that are fully protected from malicious access.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Another one from the chat. What are the most difficult aspects or the highest costs of this platform? In my opinion, historically high costs are related to moving data, for example, ETL.
Yes, absolutely. I think ETL is expensive. We, the premise that we had behind the data platform is that the data would move in the raw and through the decorations and instructions that we would create atop of the data. It would, when exposed through the data fabric, it would give the impression that it has been ETL'd, but in reality, it hasn't. So we have sort of transfer a lot of ETL costs to the last mile, which is when the data is delivered, and then use real-time computation to sort of morph that data at the point of delivery for the information that is requested. So as opposed to ETLing, I don't know, millions of rows. We only whatever is requested, we're represented in that transformed way. So I agree with you. ETL can be expensive. For large data transfers, definitely egress costs is something that you have to keep in mind, especially when you run in the cloud. Um, the other one is, a lot of if you keep the data movement to as minimize a degree that will help with your costs. We are looking at that as we look at how the data moves between Snowflake, Databricks, and our secret sauce. How to minimize the moving parts that has an effect in a lot of the computation and data costs that we have. So yeah, absolutely, those would be some of the highlights for sure.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Did you find your overall effort to be iterative in nature to develop your data fabric semantic layer? What indicators did you use to determine minimum viable product to launch, or was it more incremental after going live piecemeal?
Um, it is iterative. We had milestones to reach before we went GA. Um, we had similar to some of the software as a service vendors nowadays, where they have a private preview, public preview, and GA rollouts. We had a set of milestones for each one of those phases so that we could get the product out, but in a more constrained form from an operational and functional perspective. Um, Key elements was to have the data access and data protection elements down packed. Those were first non-negotiables, but then the data abstraction layer grew over time, in which we were decorating data sets through our data catalog. And then now we began to connect those data sets into another set of virtual models that sit atop other virtual models. So the complexity in the representation and viewing of the data, as well as the power in being able to query that data with some of the constructs we have, uh, keeps growing over time. Use cases, customer demand, and our own product vision determines what features get implemented first. Um, but the process is one that is quite agile in nature with biweekly releases and the like.
Okay, I think that covers the chat.
This was fun.
Oh, we got one more raised hand. We'll take that one real quick here. You should be here.
Same person as before, but there are many questions that come up, and yeah, so like I assume that sort of a big part there's going to be a big component in the business process for reporting data, for
Mhm.
example, regulatory reporting and things like that. Which, and I wonder, have you do you interface there to things like to FIBO or FPML or whatever standards? Like that's an area where sort of you have to connect to semantics, potentially semantic resources outside of the control of the organization.
Absolutely. To be honest, in the part of the business we're in, those are lower priority data interchanges. So the as happens, at least in my experience, many times the need to provide that true semantic, and I'll say true as in true in the way we know it, supported by a knowledge graph that is exposed through some of the RDF standards, W3C, and other types of taxonomies, ontologies, control vocabularies, like the whole gamut of the semantic as we know it. Those people that have been in the graph space, uh, those haven't hit our radar yet. And when they do, we will have to see whether that is something that we want to bake in, similar to what MarkLogic as a database did, rather than creating a uh, an adjacent component that would do the graph processing. They baked it in into the C++ code, so it's as native as it needed to be. Um, when the time comes, we'll have to determine what approach we'll take. Certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel on what is one of the most complicated, modeling practices, that of driving through a an RDF model, in my opinion. So the answer to that is no. We have not hit the use cases where that is a must-have yet.
Fernando, I have a couple of questions at a broader level. I know a number of our presenters have spoken about the theme of simplicity, and how did you leverage more of a data centric concepts to drive some of that simplicity vision? Is there any examples you might be able to share?
Sure. I mean, I think data centricity, same as when people say they democratize data, can get so overused, it kind of loses its meaning. For us, uh, the data centricity play and vision um, was so important at the BNY Mellon business that a business was rebranded to be able to highlight the importance of a data centric model, which is typically how our clients see us and interact with us, is through the notion of data and the quality of that information um, that we drive through them. So the to the point that the business now speaks the same language in how they interact with our clients as technology and data architects speak in terms of data platforms and other things. So I think it was an interesting shift where the business is adapting to some of the constructs that technology has been working for many decades. So I think that's good news overall, um, for everyone involved. Uh, Certainly simplicity in that the data problem is hard enough as is without us having to make it harder by bringing a lot of esoterics, complications for the purpose of architectural purity, um, concepts that are difficult to understand. Um, I used to be part of a software company that had a brilliant idea when it came to data and its understanding of it. But every pitch we gave, 50 of the 60 minutes was trying to explain what we were doing, and people weren't grasping it. And how can you buy when you're not even getting to understand what it is that you are the company is presenting? So I would say keeping it simple and meeting the client where he wants to meet. Um, our clients want to meet in the cloud, but they also want to meet in a way that speaks their language. And to great extent to that is the power of the tools and technology that they own today, which is SQL, uh, ODBC, JDBC connectors, APIs that understand data in tabular format. That is what they love to see. Um, they they're shying away from some of the older XML payloads that we used to send. They find them complicated, difficult to undo, and all they want is to get a set of tables and data that they can feed into their systems reliably. So it is that simplicity that our clients are demanding that are forcing us to think in much more simpler terms, Steve.
That's an excellent observation. Thanks for sharing that. And then my final question, it was going to be a bit more specific. You referenced milestones. Was there any, like critical KPIs that your team were looking at to really kind of identify, those successful business markers that you were looking to achieve? I know that might be a bit ambiguous question, but I didn't know if there was anything that you were using to identify how your team was succeeding or moving forward.
Sure, absolutely. Assets loaded is key. Hydrating our data vault with multiple data sources is a key metric of success. The exposing that information in a number of queries, because our data fabric is our tool, we have the ability to meter that information and slice and dice in multiple ways. So, uh, you know, service queries being executed by the multiple tenants that we have. It's also another set of API. The other one is the time to delivery, which is from the moment that we know of a data source that is requested to the point in which is in the hands of clients, that time to delivery is measured, right? And it keeps going down from was weeks now to taking days. Now that we have a lot of the user interface tools to support um, operations and other internal teams as well as clients to do more with the data themselves. Those are also metrics in terms of self-service capabilities and how much are they doing themselves with that data. Those are key KPIs that determine success for us, Steve.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I know we kind of finished a bit early, but why don't we take how about a half an hour break before we come back? So that'll be at 10:45 Mountain Standard Time, and so people could actually get a full lunch. And then also, Fernando, I don't know if you have time to join us in the networking sessions towards the end of the day, but if you wanted to, just let me know, and I'll set up a social table for others to interact with you.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, this is such an interesting space. So if we have technologies, architects, and other people on the call, I'm sure we all love to see how the sausage is made at the other restaurant. So happy to share that as well. Great to meet the team here and all of the listeners. Thanks so much for joining.
All right. Thank you.
Bye bye.
See you soon.